Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. Just saying hello quickly here in YouTube chat. Let me pop that out. So if you're on YouTube and have questions, feel free to ask. We'll be watching there. And cool. We are good to go. So the first thing I'd like to point out is that we're adding Lee Witcher to our title slide. So Lee's been co-host for a long time now, and it's time that we, made it official.
He's like that uninvited guest that never goes away.
Yeah. So welcome, Lee. How's it feel to be a named host?
I think it's great. It proves if you hang around long enough, you get to work for free. So
yeah. But hey, we did offer you twice what we're paying Clint. So that had to feel good.
That felt really great right there. Just knowing that made it all worthwhile.
Yep.
So I noticed that Lee is not bold where everyone else is. It looks the font is different.
Yeah. So, I did that in PowerPoint because my graphic editing skills aren't there. That's why there's a PowerPoint arrow there too. But we'll get that fixed up. I know my design skills aren't great, but that's what I can do on short notice. So Clint, what's going on with SEO this week?
Oh, I did a site audit. There's a guy getting advice in SEO Signals Lab, and that advice was absolutely positively horrible. So took pity on him and gave him a site audit and helped him out with some link analysis and some on-site analysis to hopefully get him unstuck. So I guess he's been working on this site for a couple of years, and he's stuck. And it was really on page and link building, and I go pretty deep into that. So it was good. I think I liked it. It was fun.
That's awesome. And that's one of the things I really like the most about your show is that it's, largely hands-on and tactical. Like you walk people through it. And so if you haven't seen Clint's show, you're crazy. It's some of the best SEO content out there. But check it out. You go to YouTube, you search for SEO this week. It'll be the #1 result for that on YouTube. So do check it out. And again, SEO video shows on YouTube, they make nothing. We do these as a labor of love for the SEO community. So definitely comment, like, and subscribe because we don't even get our coffee from doing it.
I wish.
Same thing with the SEO video show. This was made by Dre DeVera. He's from our communities as well. He does an interview show where he interviews all the biggest SEO personalities. So if you want to find out about the big names in the industry, he has a really great show. It's well produced. So check it out. Again, just go to YouTube, search for SEO video show, and it's another good one. And then, of course, lately I've been binge listening to this podcast. So if you're looking for more SEO content, I recommend it. Carolyn, what's going on with your show?
Well, this week I'm going to talk about the response to my sharing the ongoing research for Google indexation. And it was of such a range that I realized that, there's a lot of us that they may hear this, but they don't really get what this means for them. So I'm spending a little time talking about that.
Very cool. So your show comes out Friday mornings Pacific time, so 8 a.m. Pacific?
Central.
Okay. So yeah, check it out Friday mornings. I know Dre's show comes out on Fridays too. Clint, what your Monday show now, right?
Yeah, everyone else was doing Friday shows, so I moved.
Okay. So, Clint's content is coming out on Mondays. You got the SEO video show and Confessions of an SEO on Friday. A lot of good stuff there. So we have a lot of this stuff here. So recently we on IMG we launched the SEO Mastery Summit from 2020. So all those video replays are there. Amazing amount of content. That was an awesome summit. So check it out. We also have a SEO test review coming up tomorrow. And for us internally at IMG, it's a big one because we're going to call the testers. So tomorrow we find out who is active and participating and who is not. And then after that, we are going to have an open enrollment in the IMG community. If you want to be a new tester, we're going to have an applicants group and we'll help you do it. And if you can publish a test within the time frame, you can join the testing group. So we are going to have open enrollment for new testers after we get rid of the lurkers. So if you're an IMG tester and you're caught off guard, you haven't been paying attention, definitely hop into the group. Now's your last chance. And then we have our featured member Friday, our YouTube show roundup on Monday. There's an Ask the Expert with Kyle Roof on Tuesday. So if you're jonesing for some Kyle Roof time and you're in IMG, check that out. And that'll bring us back to Fight Club. So today's show, I'm showing more data from the SEO volatility tool I created. There are sample reports on the documentation page. There's a bunch of 2 to 3 minute videos on how I use the tool to do certain diagnostic actions for SEO. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do with this. I realize that it's not an SEO tool for everyone. It's kind of a technical SEO tool. But if you deal with ranking volatility and cannibalization issues, and you're just trying to understand what the hell is going on with the given situation, this is a pretty cool tool. So Lee, you've been playing around with this for a few days. What are your initial impression?
I think it's really neat to see sort of something that we've talked about for a while, but we can see the data very clearly now, which is that ranking is not a ranking, it's a probability distribution. So you say, oh, I checked this morning and I'm number 7. Well, you might be number 7, you might be number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range, or you might be 7 some of the time and nowhere to be found some of the time. So I think just looking at that and understanding that, and of course now we're trying to work to see if we can figure out what contributes to that level of volatility. But I think it's really interesting for people to get a handle on that, because it's important to explain to your clients, and it's important to understand that just because something flips around a couple of positions, that might just be normal fluctuation for your particular URL. So, I mean, it's enlightening, but there's a lot more to learn about it. That's for sure.
I agree. And so all the things I mentioned on this list, there are videos demonstrating what I'm doing to do those things. So definitely go check it out if you're interested. And like I said, there's like 4 or 5 example reports on the documentation page along with the videos, and you can access all of that for free. So
if you want a sample report for your keyword, just reach out to me and I have no problem running it for you.
Awesome. So yeah, Clint has it. So give him a shout out if you need a keyword. And Clint, what are your thoughts of it so far?
I like it. I'm using 1.1. You have 1.2 that was released today, so that kind of shows the amount of development you're putting into. It's not just one of those one and dones. And I'm using one for link building too, for a better understanding of the volatility and rankings, kind of like Lee said, but not as much nerd. And then I like giving those to, I've actually gotten in the habit of giving them to the clients. Since you released the first beta, my clients come with 10 dream keywords and I get to pick the rest of them. And I'm using this to show their dream keywords and the volatilities. And it kind of helps explain why a rank tracker says you're ranking for this, but you go and see it and you're ranking for that. You can give them these reports and they'll better, already anticipate, oh, Google's not giving the same ranking all the time. And this is why. So it's a 3-for tool so far. And I'm looking for more uses for it.
Yeah. If you've ever told a client, hey, I got you to number 8, and the client went and checked, and the client was like, no, we're not. We're 22. You're fired. If you've ever had a situation like that, then this tool will probably resonate with you.
And I can pretty much guarantee you, even if they're not saying it, they're looking at it and they're thinking it. So this is a good way to get ahead of all that.
Yep, absolutely. So we're going to look at some of that data and talk about the volatility between mobile versus desktop. So I know this is hard to read, so don't worry about reading it. Save yourself the eye strain. I'm just going to talk you through what I'm seeing here. And so the red that you see is downward position testing for a result. So the result is at a ranking and Google is testing it downwards at lower positions part of the time. The green is upward position testing. So it's at a ranking and some of the time Google is testing it upwards. You can test both upwards and downwards at the same time. And then another thing that's happening here is that there's also time sharing. So this column that's largely green and sometimes red, the green means they appeared in 100% of searches, but the red number means they appeared in less than 100% of searches. And that's a big deal. So this number 4, that's GameStop.com, is appearing in 30% of searches. When they do, they're at number 4 100% of the time, but they're still like not even showing up for 70% of searches. Now, this is in mobile, so mobile tends to be more strict. When we look at GameStop over in desktop, which is this other side, they're in 100% of searches for desktop, and they're 70% of the time number 5 versus 30% of searches in mobile, but 100% at number 4. So I would argue that their number 5 ranking in desktop is stronger than their number 4 ranking in mobile, because they're right off the bat losing 70% of their traffic because of the time sharing. So, one important distinction between mobile and desktop is you can rank for mobile and not be, you can rank for desktop and not be in mobile. So you can be in one, but not the other. Another thing is that you could rank at different positions between desktop and mobile, and rankings can have different strengths. So this number 4 ranking in mobile is actually weaker than the number 5 ranking in desktop because of that time sharing. So, most SEOs have probably never heard that there are cases where being number 5 can be better and stronger than being number 4. But this is an example of that when you look at the number 5 on desktop that's in 100% of searches versus a number 4 on mobile that's only in 30%.
Another good one is that Wikipedia link.
Wikipedia. So
5 in mobile and 3 in desktop.
Yep. And what we generally see, it's not all the time, but what we generally see is that mobile is harder to succeed in. And I think the reason it's harder to succeed in is the screen size, because you're dealing with a mobile phone. There's only so many square inches compared to a desktop browser, and Google has to make tougher choices with what to do with that real estate opportunity. And so because of that, you have to be mobile friendly, you have to be fast, you have to be properly formatted. It's harder to do well in mobile. They're not the same thing. Lee, what do you think about desktop and mobile not being the same?
Well, I think just here looking graphically at the left side and the right side, you can see there's a lot more volatility in the mobile rankings, like a lot greater spread than there is on the desktop side. And in some searches, it's even much more pronounced than it is here. So, I mean, clearly there's more activity going on in mobile, and anytime there's more volatility, that means that, it can be a lot harder to have any sort of stability there. So I think, that was the first thing I noticed when looking at the left side versus the right side is where's the spread. And this one's actually not too bad compared to some of the other ones that you showed.
Yeah. And if you're wondering what the keyword is here, we're looking at video games in the English US market. And so the mobile search for video games and the desktop. And we're going to look at two keywords today, and video games is the first one. So next, again, I know this is cannibalization, but I'm going to talk you through it. You don't need to struggle to read it. Just, kind of glaze your eyes over for a moment. So the tool can report on cannibalization. And so what that means is we find different URLs for the same website that are ranking. And so it's switching, and we see that their time sharing is often 100% or less, meaning that only one of them is ranking at a time. And so we can instantly, with this tool, see the cannibalization and know which pages are cannibalizing each other. And the highlighted ones, the yellow ones, are false cannibalization. And false cannibalization is kind of a tricky part of cannibalization because sometimes it's cannibalization, but usually it's not. So for example, on this first one, you can see a little bit of green here. That's 100% of searches. And right below it, the red is 30%. Don't try to read it, just, take it on faith. But what we have is this top inner page is appearing in the search 100% of the time, but the home page is also appearing 30% of the time. So what that means is 30% of the time, this has two URLs in search. So it's not cannibalizing, it's not taking the inner page out of search, but it all depends on what you wanted, right? So if you wanted the home page to be in 100% of search for this keyword, then this inner page is cannibalizing it 70% of the time. So that's why this one is highlighted as false cannibalization. Odds are it's not, but it really depends on what your goal is. This one down here is 100%, and that's fairly uncommon, but that is not cannibalization at all.
The tool doesn't do the highlights, right?
No. Well, it does in the new version, and I'll show you that on the next keyword.
Okay.
So yeah, it highlights them now. This was like version 1.1. And so some of these, are probably not cannibalization, and that's why I highlighted them. So when we look at things being cannibalized, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that were legitimately cannibalization on mobile, versus desktop where we had 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's, significantly more cannibalization happening on mobile versus desktop. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And I got the feeling, and we'll show, more data, but I got the impression that Google was more willing to do cannibalization and these pairings of two URLs. They were more likely to do those things in mobile than they were to do them on desktop. And it kind of feels like Google would rather explore a top ranking site more before turning to a lower ranking site to show it on mobile. And that's an important thing because it means you're not only ranking against the people who rank above you, but you're ranking against 2 or 3 alternative pages on their site first before you can beat them. And so you have hidden competitors on mobile because of that behavior. Because not only do you have to, outrank this first page, but you have to outrank that second alternative that Google's going to try to go to as well. And so it seems to me, and it's not conclusive, but it's definitely, making me concerned about mobile, that Google is so willing to explore more of a top ranking site before letting a lower ranking site take the spot. And that's what I think we're seeing here. What do you think about that theory, Lee?
I don't know. I don't have a better theory by any stretch of the imagination, but it's, I have questions like why on mobile? Why do it this way? Why is there more, the title testing, the meta testing, and why is mobile so much more volatile than desktop? Are they learning something over here? Are they trying different things over here, or do they just not care about desktop? So I'm not sure what to make of this data yet because it's early, but it's fascinating seeing the data for the first time.
Yeah. And so, my last statement on, Google favors alternative pages from top ranking sites before considering lower ranking sites. I'm a long way away from proving that. But I get frequent spooky moments where it just feels like that's what they're doing. And so I'm definitely excited to, keep digging deeper and try to get to the bottom of that. But that's one possible difference in what's going on is that behavior of how they select, a substitution to put in the rankings. They might be picking differently.
Could they be doing more CTR testing on mobile? They're willing to shake it up and do all their testing on mobile because the quality of the desktop, which thus improves the quality of the desktop versus the other way around.
Well, we know mobile has more rules. Desktop doesn't have to have mobile friendliness, and page weight and page speed don't matter as much as they do in mobile. They still matter, but they matter like a whole lot more in mobile. So we know there are different rules, but it's really hard to say what their motivation would be for why they do the things they do in mobile.
So my theory is just as sound as your theory.
Yeah. I couldn't disprove it at all.
Because I'm coming from the perspective of mobile first, right? So that they're doing mobile first indexing, and essentially that turned into mobile only indexing, and now we're seeing the volatility and the changes that you're able to display with your software. So it kind of tells me that they're doing more testing in mobile so that they can, thinking from the business perspective, they do more testing in mobile because maybe mobile's getting less clicks and ads. So they're doing CTR testing in mobile and then doing and applying that directly to desktop, where the desktop ads may, I'm assuming, get more clicks than the mobile ads do. So it's interesting. Especially like you had that one where the differences between mobile and desktop were significant, but when you looked really closely, it was actually they were adding mobile friendly pages, but not removing the desktop only pages, which is contrary to what the talking heads from Google said that they were going to do. So it's just all interesting to me. So another theory, figure out how to test it.
Yeah, definitely true. But it's cool that we're starting to get the methodologies and the tools and the techniques to be able to start to dissect the volatility and rankings. And so I'm really excited by the direction we're going.
I'll throw a third theory into the ring here. It may be just easier on mobile to track more data points than it is on desktop, because on desktop there's things you can do. You can use different browsers a whole lot easier. You can obscure certain tracking on that a whole lot easier than you can on mobile. So maybe mobile is just a better data testing repository for Google.
Yeah, and there's probably more trust signals from a mobile device that it's an authentic human being versus a bot. Now, I know that engineering wise, anything can be faked, but it's probably harder for, the common SEO to fake being human on a phone.
Yeah. Holly Starks is telling her to hold your beer.
Well, for the common SEO, she's frankly insane about mobile. So if you've seen her show, she did a presentation for the past couple of years where she took 100 cell phones on the road to influence mobile rankings, and it's one of the most hilarious and entertaining presentations in SEO. So, kudos to the research she did, and she built a new SEO service business out of it, and it's impressive. So again, small font, don't try to read. I promise in the next keyword, we're going to zoom in and take a closer look, but I just want to explain the 30,000 feet here. So what we're looking at is mobile description variants here. And so we're finding the same URL getting multiple descriptions in the search results. And sometimes it's 2 and sometimes it's 3. The most I've seen so far is 4. And keep in mind that we collect all this rankings data like in a few minutes. So what's not happening is these pages, they're not changing. That's not what's happening. It's not that, somebody changed the page. No, not unless all of these pages were updated in the same minute. And then Google updated them in search in the same minute. There's just no way that all of these change together like that. That's just not how it works. What's actually happening here is these pages aren't changing at all in any given moment. And Google is picking different text off the pages to test out for the description. And so we're seeing the different descriptions, and we also see that they have different appearance rates. So some will appear 90% of the time, some will appear 10% of the time, and they also rank at different positions. And so I've mentioned on past shows that there were these cases where Google was picking the description and the rankings were being volatile based on what Google was picking. Well, now we're seeing that just all the time. It's very common. And so when we look at that, this is just a sampling of all of the description variants that we are seeing on mobile only. So there's, a lot of them, and there's even more. I didn't have room on the slide to continue showing them. And then we go over to desktop, and this is it. That's all we got for description variants on the same keyword. So it's very different in the amount of split testing that Google is doing.
Is there a way to decipher those random characters? See the third one down.
Yeah, they're fixed in version 1.2.
Okay.
So yeah, the web is a very Wild West type of place. And even when a web page swears up and down that its character set is UTF-8, it doesn't mean it always is. And sometimes a document will actually change character sets midway. And depending upon how your software is coded, you can either handle that well or not. And
That's
so,
interesting.
yeah, this was a case where there were special characters injected by Google into the search results. And I had to figure out how to handle those separately from the rest of the UTF-8 text. So yeah, and here, we see again, there are different descriptions in play. And sometimes they have very different rankings. These ones were all pretty close together, which can happen, but sometimes they get a lot further apart.
So a user is using this and they're looking at this report. And we'll use the second one, the inverse.com, as an example. So I'm 35, 36, 34, and I see that Google has changed it and I get up to 33. Should I use that description? Should I change that, or is that something
to me, it's more about what you stand to gain, what you stand to lose. So I wouldn't want to lose 80% of my searches by going all in on something that gets a 20% appearance rate. That scares me a little bit. It does rank, a position and a half better. So, maybe I nudge the one I have a little bit to try to get that position better. But we'll look at some examples close up that have a much wider spread in average rank. This is kind of too close to be worth it in my book. I would like to see something with a lot more volatile range in it before I'd say, whoa, we need to get in there and do something.
Yeah.
Another thing that we've discovered is that the keyword variations that Google makes bold, they're not static either. They're very volatile. So on a keyword like video games, 10% of the time, Google won't make video games bold. And what that is over the course of all of this, that's Google making SEO tools less reliable. So that poses a lot of problems to a lot of tools on the market right now. I'm already adapting Cora. Cora is going to be able to do search sampling. You'll be able to say average it over, n searches and then do the correlations. So that's coming in 6.5. But yeah, this is a relatively new insight that the keyword variations are volatile as well. And so in the software, I'm also highlighting the keyword variations as they appear. And one interesting one was this number 1 on Amazon. They do something that I call, the super factor, where the URL, the title, and the meta description, and often the H1 are all in agreement for the same keyword. I often refer to that as a super factor. But there's something else happening here too. And Lee probably zoned in on it right away, which is all of the entities that are here: Xbox One, PS4, Wii, Xbox 360, PS3. There's just a ton in here. PlayStation, Nintendo Switch. It's packed with entities. So we got the keyword super factor plus all the really powerhouse entities for that keyword. You know, I just have to wonder if that might be a thing. Lee, what do you think?
I'm a big fan of that meta description. Big fan. You know, more the the more the relevant stuff that you get, in a lot of the top zones and stuff like that. And I'm sure that a lot of the other zones on the page, if you went and looked at it, have a lot of that stuff on there too. So,
Yep. But, just thought I'd point that out. It kind of stood out to me that it was, the super factor traditional play plus just dumping entities into the description. I thought that was awesome. And, that this was what, search decided to go with. They didn't decide to rewrite it with something else. So that was interesting to me. So the next keyword we're doing is gift baskets, and also in the English US market. And again, don't try to read it, but just look at the amount of red. So before it was mostly green with a little red. Now it's mostly red with a little green. So this keyword is extremely volatile. So Google is not locking in these choices yet. They're testing everything, and it's e-com related. And so what I think is happening here is that every day there's new gift basket offerings that emerge. Things get sold out, things come back into stock. There's high seasonality in gift baskets. The Father's Day gift baskets don't sell at the same time as the Easter gift baskets. So it's just tons and tons of volatility in this keyword, and we see it in the measurement data. So that's, interesting. And we see that volatility occurring between mobile and desktop. So they both kind of agree that this keyword is just volatile anywhere you take it. And then on the cannibalization, so this is on the mobile side, got a bit closer of a view so you can see the cannibalization. And generally, when the pages, when they add up in their time sharing to be less than or equal to 100%, you're pretty much guaranteed they're cannibalized. Only one's appearing at a time, and it's one or the other. So this one adds up to 100%. So there's always a Forbes link in the search, but it's not always the same for Forbes link. Sometimes they can be more than 100%, and then it's really confusing because you'll see like 3 of them listed there, and it'll add up to be 140%. And what that means is that some of the time they're showing 2 URLs, but they're always rotating one out as being cannibalized. So it can even get complicated like that. And then on the desktop side, here's how they're grayed out if they're false cannibalization now. So before I was highlighting them in PowerPoint, but now the software will gray out the false cannibalization. We leave them in there because there is a remote chance that the 10% one is the one you're trying to rank for the keyword, and the other one is cannibalizing it. Odds are that's probably not the case. The 100% was probably the intended target, but you never know. So we list it there anyway. So title variance is another thing we look at. So when Google is split testing different titles for a page, we can see what's going on with them. So in this one, there was an ellipsis, and in the other version, they're adding on the brand. And so they score, relatively differently. So 38 and 47 are definitely different rankings. It's interesting that having the brand a second time would be worse. So, can't really explain that. So they have brand and then a slogan, and then it's brand, slogan, brand. That's interesting to me. Might be worth a test at some point. And this other one, they had the same average rank. They probably scored the same. It's just an ellipsis on the word baskets. So not much to learn from that, but we look at that. What I find is that title variance is about equally rare on both desktop and mobile. So it's not a very common thing where Google is split testing 2 or more different titles. Now, this is different than title rewriting, which is the hot topic today. People are like, oh, Google's rewriting my title. That's not what we're measuring here. What we're measuring is when Google is testing 2 or more different titles in search.
Rank Gear should have a tool for that here very, very soon. We're going to actually use the zones that you identified, find out if they're changing the title, and then try to find which zone from the website is coming from.
Nice.
Or if Google made it up.
When you get that up and running, we'll have to have a show on it. And so for this keyword for gift baskets on mobile description variants, there were 70 split tests going on. I'm not showing all 70 here. I'm showing some of the more wide volatility spreads here. But there were 70 in mobile for this keyword. I mean, that's a huge amount. That's most of the top 100 was getting a split test for the search result description. And so we look at some of these. So there's an average rank of 3, average rank of 3, average rank of 1. Well, we look at it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 match words in those first two, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in the third. And guess what? Which one ranked best? The one with the 12 variants. Surprise, surprise. It's not always that way, but it's often that way. Look at this next one here, the Atkins Farm one. So average rank 27, average rank 44. That's a pretty big spread. And when we look at the 44, they had 1, 2 matches, and on the 27, they had 1, 2, 3, 4. So the one with more matches ranked better. Look at the next one. Didn't have any variations in the first with an average rank of 73. Had an exact match in the second with an average rank of about 40. So 33 position jump just by having the exact match in there. Here's another one, average rank 7, average rank about 5, average rank 2. Turns out the one with 2 has more matches. Average rank 8, average rank about 5. And again, this bottom one has 4 matches. The one that ranked 8 has 2. So again, it's not always that way, but it really is suggestive. It's at least part of the formula. It's not the whole formula. Like we saw with Amazon that they had the one exact match in the description, and then they loaded it up with entities and made it to the #1 spot. So there are different recipes that work, but this is probably a factor in what's going on. What do you think, Lee?
I was noticing that, you had mentioned that before, and looking at the data, sort of seeing that, and I'm thinking, wow, it'd be great, now that we have the ability to download some of this, maybe to correlate that and see if it's you know, if it holds up. I'm also wondering if at the bottom of some of my pages, I should put, you know, keyword, keyword, keyword like 3 times or something like that to close out an article. If
Done
Google,
already?
if what,
Oh,
Clint?
So you're not doing that already? What's wrong with you?
I'm only putting it twice, but I'm thinking of going up to 3 now. But you know, something along those lines, you know, if it's paying off with a higher ranking, you know, why not?
yeah, it's definitely something to test. Like if you're, you know, getting stuck at number 17 and you'd much rather have, you know, an average rank of 10, then, you know, maybe you experiment with it, see if you can't get into that better bracket. And so this was from mobile. And again, there were 70 of these for this keyword. And then on desktop, there was only 5. I could get all 5 on the page. But again, it's the same thing. Here's average rank 5, average rank 8.8. The average rank 5 had more matches. Here's average rank 6 and average rank about 12. So, you know, that's a pretty big spread. Page 1 or page 2, and the page 1 had more matches. This one is pretty close, but even though it's really close, the better ranking one had more matches. You know, again, average rank 10, average rank 3. This one had 3 matches. That one had 2. So, you know, it's not an always thing, but, you know, geez, it happens a lot. And the other thing is, occasionally I will like watch one of these scenarios. So I'll watch, like, you know, this one where it's between 12 and 6, you know, it's flip-flopping page 1, page 2, which one will Google pick? And more often than not, Google picks the worst ranking one. So all those people out there who aren't setting their meta description saying Google will do right by me, they'll test them out and pick the one that works best. Yeah, they'll pick the one that works best for their KPIs, for their needs, that helps maximize ad revenue. But they're not picking the one that ranks best. That's not how this works. That's not the KPI they're after. And most SEOs don't like understand that. Google is not picking the one that ranks better. They sometimes do, but they very often don't. And if you leave it to Google, and that's insane. Like, you know, you could have the volatility on your website for your pages where it's consistent. It's like this one, 6, 6, 6. Or you could have the volatility on your website where it's 16, 6, 7, 6, 16, 6, 7, 7, 17. Like, that's a huge amount of volatility in your rankings. And if you did that site-wide on all of your pages, what are you doing to the volatility of your rankings site-wide? I mean, that's a colossal amount of chaos that you're introducing by just saying, I'm not going to use a meta description. Why even test it? Google will pick it. Okay, you know, I don't think that's smart, but, you know, yeah, you can do it that way. What do you think, Clint?
You know, I've never been a fan of leaving them blank. I know a lot of people jumped on that bandwagon, but I was always just, it's common sense to me. Like, this company does not have your best interest at heart. So why are you going to give them an opportunity to jack you up? That was my stance all along. And then now seeing the tool and seeing the results and seeing which one they pick. Like, you have a screenshot here of one where they picked the worst one. I think I've done 150 runs now, and I see that consistently, that they're picking the worst one to run. So if nothing else convinces you that Google doesn't have your best interest at heart, then these reports should do it. But, you know.
Yeah, I think you need to control your zones and you need to tune them to be optimal. And there are ways of doing that. There's the data no snippet attribute to tell Google to piss off on the text you don't want them using. And there are ways to control it, and I think SEOs need to change their practice and control their message, try to regain some of the control and the stability in these situations. So that's all I have today. Let me take a look around for some questions in chat.
On the YouTubes, there's only one. Have you thought about sticking your toe in the water when it comes to PPC software?
Every darn day. And it's really hard for me not to. So pay-per-click is my fallback plan. I even know the tools I'd want to build in that arena. But my heart is in SEO. So, I'd need to crash and burn in SEO first. Then I'd probably move over to pay-per-click. What about you, Clint?
PPC tools? Honestly, I just don't. I know enough about PPC to be dangerous, but I don't know enough to be considering tools and stuff like that. I'm still a rookie in that regard.
Yeah, it's a harder one to dive into, but it's definitely an easier market to sell value into. There's fewer players. It's more about, can we get a good ROI on the spend? And so it's, in a lot of ways, PPC is an easier market to play in for being a tools developer.
Yeah. Well, there's so much, right? There's finding the ads and showing the ad types. There's software to create the ads. There's software to create the display ads. There's software to create the video ads, or software to do the research to find the videos to put your display ads and all that kind of stuff. So it's just so such a big place. I wouldn't even know where to start from a SaaS perspective.
Yeah, I have ideas because I've managed large budget campaigns before, and I know my favorite pain point I can solve well. But that's my rainy day plan.
Most of my experience is either small business or Google grant accounts. And the Google grant accounts are pretty easy because essentially you have to put them on their machine learning systems in order to keep the Google grants running. So.
Yep.
I guess Brian didn't catch on, but is that Quora or your new software you're using there, Ted?
It's the new software. So that's the SEOvolatility.com. And there's example reports and a bunch of 3-minute videos on the use cases.
Can you change the IP address as with that new volatility tool, so it pulls from an East Coast to West Coast or a Canadian IP and see?
It works the same way Quora does. So
Okay.
you can specify a country, language. It works with Unicode. You can localize near a city or zip code or address. So it's all the same way Quora works.
What, can I change an actual physical IP address?
No.
No. Okay.
Let's see.
I mean, you could change the IP address on your machine.
Yeah, that's the one way to do it. Yeah.
But
it wouldn't work that way.
It's running the API, so
it's pulling from the API, so it wouldn't make any difference.
Yeah. Let's see on our Zoom chat. Keyword cannibalization / diversity of search at play. Those pages probably already rank but are hidden. I don't know the context of that one.
That came up in the cannibalization slides.
Ah,
So the idea, I think, is that the other variations are the other pages that are popping in and out are already ranking for, you know, other things.
yeah,
In here.
I think his statement there is true. That yeah, Google's already processed them. They already score relatively well, you know. But the thing that I noticed is that it seemed like Google would rather uh, try a different page on the same site in mobile than move up a lower ranking page into the spot. And I don't see that happening on desktop as much. It's not like Google's trying to maintain the fast website at the top on desktop. Doesn't seem to be similar.
Got two things here real quick. One is it's interesting that I didn't even make it to the end of the show before I got booted off the final slide. But the other one is, I think that one of the takeaways that people should take from this is, you know, you had mentioned that people assume, SEOs assume that, hey, if I leave the meta description off, Google will pick the best one for me. And clearly that's not happening here. They're not picking the one that's higher ranking, which is the one that I, as an SEO, would want them to choose. They have their own criteria, whatever those happen to be. So, you know, just that blind faith that Google will take care of me, this is just more evidence that that is misplaced.
Very true. So let's see. Thane wants me to message him my pay-per-click ideas. No way, man. That's my retirement. I'm happy to talk about ideas, but there's, you know, my secret product ideas I need to hang on to. He also says what's ridiculous is WordPress doesn't come natively with custom meta descriptions. Yeah, you know, platform to platform, it can get hard to address with these things, you know. To a certain extent, nothing beats custom for SEO, but oftentimes custom is cost prohibitive because not all businesses can have an engineering team. So yeah, thank you everyone. I hope you liked the show, and we will see you again next week.